Welcome, Val, Chief AI Officer of Weka.
Yes.
We've done one of these in San Francisco, so it's great to actually see you here in New York City. Obviously, thanks for making this event possible. Val, you're probably too modest to talk about all your exploits as kind of a leader in Kubernetes and the various protocols and storage and Windows. I can't list the number of contributions you've made. So, I'm just curious, look, what your reactions are, kind of these comments. Were they expected? Was there anything that provoked you, first of all, in terms of things you'd like to put into perspective? Because you're seeing a lot of customers. You've got a lot of customers invested in GPUs. Anything provoke you?
I wouldn't say provoke at all. Yeah. It's inspire more than anything else. I think Ben and James are very representative of the market. There's definitely some really important foundational model builders in this market that are enabling so much else. And then James, I think, is just a super modern applicator, if you will, of all these technologies, being cloud native and so forth. I thought that last question was probably one of the most fascinating one, because I'm a technologist by nature, but I've been focusing so much lately on unit economics and gross margins of this business, and I can't escape the whole notion that if you remember Travis Kalanick, who remembers that name? Yeah. So founder of Uber, famously ousted from Uber, and then as soon as Dara came in, I think, surge pricing became a thing, right? Like most people might not remember.
I didn't know the surge pricing came in under them.
More or less, yeah. That's when the focus on being profitable came in, and all of a sudden, real market rates for ride sharing appeared for the first time. The same thing is about to happen, with AI, particularly with inferences. We don't have real market rates today. We have subsidized rates. That's necessary to enable a lot of the innovation that's happening right now. But sooner or later, certainly the trillions of dollars of CapEx we're talking about now, and the pretty finite energy OpEx, real market rates are going to be around, or going to appear significantly, perhaps next year, certainly by 2027. That'll fundamentally change this industry, and it'll drive an even deeper, keener focus on efficiency.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. So maybe we can walk through that first point. I think where you're seeing a token explosion, and I think we heard it from these two, right? There's no bubble in the terms of desire to have the tokens, right? To that question, right? It's the economics behind the investment to actually generate them, and whether there's enough use cases. But can you walk us through your read on the tokens and where that's going? Agents are big. You have a philosophy that actually people are moving to agents for enterprise application building versus vibe coding, for example,
exactly.
Right?
In a big way.
How does that token usage go from here?
So the first rule is that this is an industry where more is more. So more tokens directly equal exponentially more business value. That's been established. What we haven't figured out yet, again, is how to make that a sustainable thing right now. There's a classic triad in AI between accuracy, so the quality of the output tokens in particular, latency and cost. So accuracy is kind of non-negotiable, right? We don't want a bad answer to any ChatGPT query. We certainly don't want a bad answer to building new drugs and models and things of that nature. So that's non-negotiable, where you have to have a high amount of tokens for high accuracy, especially when you add cybersecurity into the mix, to add guardrail models and quality models. And then you're trading off essentially latency and cost. That's where you have some flexibility, is if you can tolerate high latency, and sometimes you can for consumer use cases, then you can have a lower cost for the free tiers and a low cost plus tiers. Often now we're seeing that with agents, nobody wants to sit around and wait hours for a response. These agents now don't operate in any singular sense. You either have an agent swarm or no agentic activity at all. And these swarms, they go through what's called multiple turns, hundreds, if not thousands, of prompts and responses until the swarm sort of converses or convenes on an answer. And if you have a compound delay in those 1,000 turns, it becomes kind of untenable. So latency is really, really important, and that means typically having to pay a high price today that's subsidized, and that's what's going to have to come down over time.
Yeah, and I just wanted for the audience, because you're reading the market so quickly. I don't know if that word agent swarm is actually fully flooded for everyone in the room. Anyone heard of that term? Just a hands up. Yeah, so good half of the room. But can you just talk through what an agent swarm is?
Absolutely. When you have a simple prompt and ChatGPT in the response, that's not agentic. That's a model responding, obviously using tools like web search now to give you an answer.
Yeah.
When you ask an agent, and the best canonical example today is in software, write me, what Anthropic did with their Claude Sonnet 3.5 announcement about a week and a half ago. It said, write me the entire Slack app. Like, that's a very sophisticated SaaS app, super sophisticated instant messaging and group chats and all that. So the agent went away and it spent 30 hours creating a swarm of subtasks. And in 30 hours, for several tens of thousands of dollars, I think, it recreated Slack.
Right. And
that was super impressive.
So that swarm is, you've literally got a testing agent, you've got a security agent, you've got the model, all these different agents.
It starts with an orchestrator agent where the smartest model figures out what does it take to build Slack. What architecture decisions are required, what cloud or on-prem decisions are required, what are the performance considerations, what are the functional considerations, what are the privacy and security. So the orchestrator figures out a bunch of subtasks, and then the subtasks go off and do the work.
Yeah.
And then that's a swarm of activity, hundreds of parallel sessions, basically, parallel users as far as inference is concerned. And then there's evaluator models which judge, okay, is this task complete according to specification? If not, try again. Usually there's about like 10 final versions of an app in these agentic swarm systems. And then they get voted on by an agentic committee. And the committee decides, 8 don't work. 1 is slow, and 1 is fast and efficient, and it's correct. So that'll be the final one.
Yeah, and this is accelerated over the summer as people have gotten a lot more sophisticated, and the agentic frameworks have gotten more sophisticated to allow this sort of thing to happen, right? So something that's really real time. We can go into this more, I think, with questions. I just want to get through this next question, which is reinforcement learning. We really haven't talked about this, but it's one of those things that most enterprise users, presumably all of you from enterprise, if they're thinking a way to inject their domain experience and data, questions, answers into the model system, and reinforcement learning is the new paradigm. How does that affect the token economics? Right?
That is such a pivotal question because I like to talk about the seasons of AI, particularly this year. So early this year, we went through the reasoning season of AI. Reasoning models became really popular, valuable, useful, ultimately somewhat affordable, especially with open source models. Then the agentic season, came around the spring, summer of this year. And I was a skeptic, as I told you, in San Francisco, right? I was an agent skeptic because agents just weren't that good on a general basis until around May of this year. And then a massive, milestone happened where the context windows were large enough, the GPUs were available enough, and now, as of May, agents can write proper software. As you were saying, it's like 90% in some cases of software is generated by coding agents, and that's a recent phenomenon, right? That wasn't the case 12 months ago. So this is progressing at a just enormous pace. And the current season we're in right now is the reinforcement learning season. And why that's fascinating is it's not just another scaling law. It actually blends a lot of elements of training and inference into one unified workflow, and there's a lot of looping involved. And when you talk to some of the folks at the leading labs, the OpenAIs and Anthropics and Geminis of the world, they will tell you that reinforcement learning is the critical path now, is the latest and greatest scaling law to this mythical milestone we're all trying to reach called AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. So it's really, really critical, and what's fascinating to me is that you have to apply all the best practices of how you train models, plus all the best practices of how you infer models to be able to iterate these thousands of reinforcement learning loops and advance the whole field.
Okay, great. So I'm going to put you on the spot. We've got maybe 1 minute left. Your big takeaway so far of the conversations. I know we started it with a provocation, but you were inspired. And anything else in terms of things that you're taking away from this meeting today, conversations you had so far?
So 2 things, right? There is no one answer here. This is such an emerging field right now that going all on-prem is the right thing for especially model builders. Being cloud native is absolutely the right thing if you want to be a very agile, responsive, innovative business, right? So there's no cookie cutter here. You've got to be able to adapt as your business needs to one or the other, or in some cases both. The economics, fundamentally matter here. We are definitely in a boom and in a bubble, you could say, in some cases, and a lot of the underlying economics are being subsidized. But that doesn't mean that if tokens get more expensive, you're going to stop using them or you're going to stop using them. Absolutely not. You're just going to get very, very fine-grained in terms of how you use them. And I love the drill down of by transaction, because that's more important than the token cost. Is what does this really cost for the unit economics of my business? So it's one of my key takeaways. I think the turnout here is really great. The questions have been phenomenal so far, and just looking forward to hearing some of the questions and talking about how we can, if that time really is up, how we can continue to advance this fascinating field that I love being part of.
That's great. Okay, let's go to questions. Thanks, Val.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Val. I'm Jonathan Sherman from the World Economic Forum. I have a quick question about the regulatory framework. We're moving, this agentic world and the AI world is moving very, very fast. Something we see with a lot of our European partners is, the US is moving very quickly in the space. Deregulation is a huge part of that. Where do you think sort of the ceilings of this regulatory framework come in? And are you guys anticipating changes to the regulatory framework, let's say if there's a midterm election in 2026 or changes in the European parliaments over the next 2 years that could change this rapid growth of AI?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think there's been some coverage over the last few days around the fact that, at least for OpenAI traffic, it's actually kind of tailed off in Europe as opposed to growing everywhere else in the world. And the speculation is that's a direct reflection of the fact that there's a lot of regulation in Europe, of OpenAI and Anthropic and Google and other models, and that all the newest features that are really exciting, a lot of the agentic features, whether they're software development, life sciences, personal therapy, all the things people use right now, the desktop, the computer use features, just weren't available, still aren't available in Europe. So personal opinion here, really not even speaking for the company or the industry, but observation as a long time, tech in the industry and tech leader in the industry, is that this is such a young and embryonic industry that regulation is premature in general. And I think the US is doing the right thing here. Indirectly, China is obviously doing the right thing. You've just got to spur the innovation right now. We are not at a Skynet moment yet. The doomsday scenarios are theoretically possible in the future. There's an off switch today in everything we do with AI, literally, right? You can literally pull a plug and it just ends. So AI is a contained risk right now, and we just definitely have to enable the innovation. Having said that, this fundamental concept of recursive self-improvement and essentially exponential progress is part of AI. It's the progress we've seen in the last 12 months alone has been phenomenal. So will we need more regulation in the future? Yes. And it's like any law, how you implement it, how you define it, is the hardest part, because it's really hard. Some of the laws in place now that try and regulate flops or try and regulate tokens or try and regulate model parameter sizes, they're not, I'll be kind, they're not effective first steps here. They're just not getting the job done.
Sorry, we got an order here. We got a question here. So we were going to take away from politics because I saw a bunch of hands go up, and we're going to debate this baby. But no, let's keep on track.
Yeah, thank you, Val, for sharing. So my name is Xing. I'm a financial advisor at UBS Private Wealth Management. So here's my question. Not all the business models are transactional basis. For example, me as an advisor, I don't really care how many tokens my analysts used, as long as the investment result are good for my client. So personally, I don't know how to evaluate what's the marginal utility that is actually contributed by each of the token in terms of the eventual result. So what do you think can be a great matrix to evaluate the performance of each of the token, or maybe is there a holistic way to evaluate that? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's definitely a great question. It's a very much a case-by-case basis. So it's at what granularity do you want to measure those unit economics, right? Do you want to measure them purely at the inference, the token level? Do you want to measure them, and again, at the agentic output level? I love the innovation in business models around pay per outcome as opposed to pay per use. And we're going to have to figure that out right now. It's a very risky thing for companies and startups to want to do that. But I think it's essential right now because the per unit costs, the variable token costs, are not sustainable. To get the highest quality, it becomes really an unaffordable thing right now. And so, in order to make the business unit cost to your point, right? Your outcome is much more important than the supply chain unit economics. That's ultimately how we're going to be measuring it. And as we're saying, this is just a young industry. There's just a lot of evolution that is going to happen right now. Having worked in cloud for 15 years, for the last 15 years at least, we're kind of in year 1 or 2 of a 15-year process at least here. And we will get to a level of maturity where some of these things will harmonize, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
So real quick, full disclosure, I'm not Val's brother-in-law. I'm not going to see him at Thanksgiving dinner next month. But I'd love for you to give a shameless plug for your company. I'd like to know what your company does, what's your secret sauce, what's your discriminating capabilities. The 90-second, 2-minute elevator pitch, please,
Thanks,
sir.
thanks for the question. That's really important.
I do appreciate that. Yeah, check's not in the mail. But so Weka is a storage and memory company. So for the world of AI and machine learning, we started doing machine learning before the ChatGPT embryonic moment in November 2022. Some of the biggest self-driving model companies in the world, some of the biggest, MSK, Memorial Sloan Kettering, just drug discovery companies in the world have been using Weka for a long, long time. We've been a high-performance storage system, very, very high-performance storage system for those customers. The reason I joined a year ago was I took a look at the actual technical specifications of what Weka does, and I realized we can apply the economics of storage to deliver memory. Actual, honest-to-goodness memory performance, which if you pack your Amazon cart with a SSD and a DIMM, basically, for memory, you'll notice there's a 10 or 20x cost difference because it's worth that much more. So in the world of inference, and this applies really to not just unit economics but reinforcement learning, we're able to deliver a memory system at the cost of storage. And that is one of those radical transformations of the industry because we talk about abundance, this duality of abundance and scarcity in AI. The abundance of it can change our lives fundamentally in the next few years of what AI can do and enable. But the scarcity of resources, scarcity of GPUs, scarcity of power, and we were joking earlier on, the most scarce thing in the world and the most valuable piece of real estate in the world isn't one of the condos, $100 million condos up near Central Park here. It's actually the high bandwidth memory on the GPUs themselves. On a per unit basis, that is insanely expensive. It just went up 10% yesterday in the spot market, right? So the demand for this is off the charts, and the ability to augment this memory at fundamentally different cost of goods is really my passion around Weka because it advances the whole field.
Yeah, so that was Val's 3-minute version. I think my version is, that real estate on the GPU, right? There's a very small amount of memory, right? That's allowing that GPU to call that information, the KV cache that James was talking about, so important. They figured out how to access that, right? And it's a pretty cool technology. Yeah, right over here.
Now I have a mic. Thanks for sharing your insights. My question is, I remember reading either last year or earlier this year that models, when they're trained, the models have been trained, especially the generalized models, have been trained on the internet, the world's data. They've been scraping Reddit, Stack Overflow, all of this stuff. What happens when we run out of data and humans stop generating that content? And the research I was referring to said that models actually collapse on themselves when trained on synthetic data. Really curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I love that question because, again, I was definitely there a few months ago. You can use the word incestuous, right? Like the models, if they train on their own data, on their own synthetic outputs, ultimately just degrade. What's happening, though, not surprisingly, is what the internet is best at, is it's turning us, as users into the product in free tiers. So the free tiers of all the big labs of ChatGPT, of Anthropic, of Google, et cetera, are fundamentally creating real reinforcement learning data, whether it's human feedback or just the verifiable rewards of it works, and what we confirm works and what doesn't. And that is one of the next big sources alongside synthetic data that's being better and better curated to not have those negative qualities and attributes. But we are in a phase right now where we are the product if we're not paying for it. And a lot of our interactions with these models are literally leading to the training data sets for the next versions of these models. Welcome.
Yeah,
I have the microphone. My name is Amy Rockefeller. I'm working for a family office. So I have 2 questions if you don't have time to reply them. The first is that you guys talking about the tokenomics in AI inference. From infrastructure perspective, how do you see the economics of a token in terms of cost per token throughout? How do you see that reshaping the data platform design? The second question I have is more on the investment perspective. How do you see a capital allocation shifting between the AI compute and the data infrastructure over the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, the second one, if I can sort of give you a quick answer, is easier to start with, which is we've seen an enormous amount of CapEx and OpEx invested in training models over the last few years, particularly large language models. We're definitely, even before the era of needing to be profitable, seeing a turn this year into inference investment. And so a lot of analyst opinions, and I'm definitely in that camp, is that 4 out of every $5 used to be focused on training up until the beginning of this year. Now it's going to be 4 out of $5 focused on inference. And so you're going to see a big shift in terms of just, whether it's for monetization reasons, whether it's literally to come up with more reinforcement learning data, you're going to see a big shift towards inference going forward. And that has lots of interesting ramifications, but the most interesting one perhaps is an example of NVIDIA pre-announced about a month ago. They pre-announced a processor called Rubin CPX. And what's fascinating is it's not only the first dedicated processor from NVIDIA to just focus on inference, it's the first processor to focus on one phase, the first phase of inference called prefill, which is actually the fundamental bottleneck of all large language model AI, transformer models today. If you can solve that bottleneck, it's something Weka actually does by requiring less prefills, then you really unlock a whole new possibility of the industry in terms of how many tokens we can generate, quality tokens, at a sustainable rate power-wise and tokenomics-wise.
Yeah, prefill being that context that the model has to load in after you load the prompt in, right, instead of ejecting it. So yeah, that's a big challenge.
It's the inner loop of AI, and if you can solve that inner loop, which we haven't until now, then you really unlock a whole new era of AI.
Great stuff, Val. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I feel like we could keep going.
Absolutely.
Big round of applause for Val.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.